There's this concept called the Pygmalion Effect, otherwise referred to as self-fulfilling prophecy, and it actually centers itself around an old fable, right, or an old story. Whether this is true or whether it's not, there are many renditions of this story, so I'm not saying that my rendition is the most accurate to the original story, it's just our rendition. Pygmalion was a sculptor, and back in the day, in ancient Greece or whenever he used to live, he was doing his best. He wanted to sculpt and portray true beauty. So he ended up sculpting or creating a sculpture, and over months, over years, he ended up becoming so completely engrossed with this sculpture of what he thought beauty was. This became, in his eyes, true beauty to him. In the end, what happened was, I think it was Athena, the goddess of beauty, came along and tried to capture his attention because he'd essentially just created or sculpted this idol. True beauty then came and presented itself to him, but he couldn't see it for what it was because he had, in his own eyes, just created true beauty within itself. Now, what you take from that story is entirely up to you. But there's an interesting idea that we could begin to entertain here, and this is that the more we focus on something, the realer and more vivid it becomes to us. All right, and this kind of gives us a basis for this idea, self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether we believe that we can or whether we believe that we can't, we're true. If we believe we're beautiful, we are. If we believe that we're smart, we are. If we believe that we're creative, we are. If we believe that we are worthless, we are. We will act and behave in accordance with who we believe that we are. So we end up fulfilling unconsciously the prophecies that we make about ourselves. If we believe that we can become expert neuro-linguistic programming practitioners, if you want to take some of these ideas and share them with other people for the purposes of improving the quality of people's lives, you can. But if you believe that you are doomed to a life of drudgery and failure and smallness and loneliness and isolation, then your actions will essentially determine the outcomes that you go on to experience. So we fulfill our own prophecies in life. All right, it's just what happens. Here is a very, very basic model that will hopefully help you to understand this. Now, once this clip is finished, I want you to map this diagram out on a bit of paper or something like this and fill it in for yourself. Make it relevant to you, right? Obviously, I'm standing on the other side of a screen, so I've got no idea how this model actually relates to where you're currently at in life, but you do. So, where should we start? Let us start here with what we essentially believe about ourselves, all right? Going back around about 20 years ago, there or thereabouts, I'd left the military. Now, when I was serving in the military, I believed myself to be a significant human being because I saw back then being in the military as a significant thing to do with one's life. The only problem was that the more time elapsed from my being in the military to being outside of the military, i.e. the further removed I became from military service, the further removed I became from feeling like a significant man, all right, because my significance was in some way associated with being a soldier. Now, you might be thinking this is like a warped perspective. Of course it was, but I only understand it. I've only come to understand it through the years, how it was that I'd related to me. So back then, I only needed to do something that I perceived to be significant with my life because I fundamentally believed that I was insignificant. And back then, you got to understand, I would spend most of my time doing my best to prove myself to people, to validate myself to people, to get people's approval, get people's acceptance, 9 times out of 10 through trying to be someone that I wasn't, because I'd never made peace with who I was. Because I defined myself as being insignificant, all right, guess how I was perceived by other people? Insignificant. And the reason why I was insignificant for other people was because I'd never committed to simply being autonomous and authentic, just being the real me. I'd never committed to being the real me because I saw the real me as being insignificant. So I didn't want to be that person. I tried instead to be someone that I wasn't. Now, many people live their lives in this way, all right? I'm sharing this with you, hoping that on some level you're going to be able to relate on a personal level, or possibly you're going to be able to identify someone else in your life who is perhaps striving through life in this way. So here's the thing. I want to now modelify this process so you understand it, so you can see it, and I'm going to invite you to please reflect upon this model for yourself, right? Never mind looking to identify someone else who's kind of going through this, but look at how this might be relevant for you. Because what we believe about ourselves will influence how it is that we are for other people. If, for example, we believe we are worthless, unlovable, so on and so forth, then how do you think it might be that we interact with others? Well, if we believe that we are unlovable, then it's highly unlikely we're going to act in a loving or a caring way. All right? I've worked with, on a professional level, some people who have performed exceptionally well in the boardroom. They've performed exceptionally well on the sports field or something like this, only to completely undermine themselves in their private, intimate, social lives, because their persona, their identity is in some way wrapped up with and associated with what they do. All right? So some people will pursue fame and fortune and the spotlight in life, wanting to make a name for themselves, wanting to be seen as great by others, for no other reason than to overcompensate for the lack of value that they perceive themselves to possess. So some people believe themselves to be useless, worthless, hopeless, not good enough, not this enough, not that enough, and then end up trying to overcompensate through their actions and their behaviours, through the way in which they are for other people, which ends up undermining the health of the connections they go on to develop with people. All right? So we sabotage our best intentions, and we end up fulfilling our own prophecies unconsciously. So how we are for other people now impacts how other people perceive us. Think about it. If we're going through life trying to show people who we are, trying to put on a persona, and I've seen this, permission to speak freely. Now, please hear me right here. Before I say this, I am not trying to undermine or generalize a group of people. But the example I'm going to use will be gay pride. All right? Now, I have friends or people that I work with who are gay, so this is nothing against people's sexual orientation. Please hear me right. But what I am going to speak out against is the attitude and the behaviours that some people take who define themselves as gay. Some people will define themselves as being gay or straight or whatever, all right? And then end up acting and behaving in a way that's completely out of their own character so that they can be accepted within this generalized social group. People end up being who they think they need to be in order to be accepted by other people. So this has got nothing to do with a person's sexual orientation, but it has everything to do with how some people of a certain sexual orientation behave and conduct themselves, which will sometimes be completely incongruent to who they actually are, so they just fit in and be accepted. For example, young men or young women who act really tough and macho or whatever, butch. You'll have, young men or fully grown middle-aged men who end up, acting queenie, prancing around. This is a behaviour, it's an action. Doing all this kind of stuff. It's a choice. All right? Some people will act and behave in order to fit in. But when we act and behave in order to fit in, and I can just step out of the gay pride thing here and step into military culture, right? I'll use military culture here as a second example, right? One which I'm going to own myself. When I stepped into military culture, I perceived military culture to be macho, strong men, macho guys. So how did I act and behave? I ended up overemphasizing myself, going to the gym and doing a whole load of stuff that I didn't really want to do, that wasn't really me, just in order to fit in with my camaraderies, my peers back in the day. So we're looking at exactly the same thing here, just from two different angles. So there's no bias, there's no prejudice here. I'm owning how I've operated out of this myself, all right? How other people perceive us determines how people behave towards us, all right? If we are real with people we're giving people a reason to trust us. If we're being authentic, if we're being honest, if we're being sincere, again, we're giving people a reason to trust us. But if we are acting and behaving in a way that we think is going to fool people into trusting us, then we're compromising the trust that people will essentially extend to us. So how people behave towards us then goes on to reinforce what we believe about ourselves. And this is a vicious circle that some people end up finding themselves in for anything up to an entire lifetime. Some people in their younger years will not get the acceptance or the validation or the approval that they want, the unconditional positive regard from the parents. All right? I struggled with this when I was young. Going back to being 10 or 11 years old, being told that I'm immature, right? How I'm receiving this is I'm not good enough. I'm not manly enough. I'm not mature enough. So of course, as I join the army, as I join the military, of course I want to overhand myself because I fundamentally believe that who I am isn't yet enough. I'm not mature enough, I'm not manly enough, I'm not great enough, I'm not this enough. So I joined the military for the purposes of breaking out of this culture that doesn't accept me, and then I try to be someone that I think is going to be accepted inside of this new culture that I want to be like. Does that even make sense? Does it sound insane? Because I think it kind of is a little bit, but I also think that many of us live our lives in this way, trying to be someone that we're not in order to fit in the cultures and the socio-economic groups that we associate with. All right? And through the entire process, we end up compromising our own integrity, undermining our own authenticity, not being real with other people. So when we end up not being real with people, the assumptions that people make about us are based upon this false persona that we portray. So if people end up behaving negatively towards us or rejecting us, they end up rejecting this person that we're trying to be, not who we are. And then what happens? Well, we end up assuming, yeah, that's right, these assumptions that I made about myself are right, they're true, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not mature enough, I'm not manly enough, I'm not feminine enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. And all of the validations are just simply spawning from the responses that we get from other people that are stemming from us being someone that we're not. Makes sense. I've just explained this relatively well. This is like a perpetual cycle. We will not enter into a liberated state of existence in life until we break free from this nonsense. All right? Here's the thing. I'm doing my best to lead by example here. Granted, my communications are not perfect. The way in which I'm communicating these processes there's room for improvement right across the board. I get this, but I'm doing my best to be real rather than anything else. Just be real. It's the greatest risk we can take in life. Why? Because when we're real, if other people reject us for being real, they're rejecting us for being who we actually are. But here's the thing. Those people who accept us and are okay with us just being who we are, well, those people are revealing themselves as true friends. True friends that we can end up staying connected with for the rest of our lives. And when we have strong, robust, true, healthy connections in life, this just simply reduces the need for us to be anything less than who it is that we actually are. All right? Of course we all want to fit in. Of course we all want to be accepted. We all want to be liked. We all want to be loved. None of us want to be rejected or loathed, and none of us want to be discriminated against. But sometimes, and this is the last idea I want to share, the greatest discrimination that we engage in life isn't the discrimination that we extend towards others. It's sometimes the discrimination that we extend towards ourselves when we fail or refuse to make peace with who we simply are. And when we don't make peace with who we are, we end up trying to be someone that we're not. And when we try to be someone that we're not, it's this false version of us that other people end up reacting and responding to. And this is what leads many people into a state of isolation, loneliness, despair in life. All right, I'm not going to be speaking to everyone in this video, but I'm going to be speaking to some people. And if you think that, this isn't relevant to everyone at some point in their life, think again, because I'm absolutely convinced that we all go through this at some stage in our lives. When we become aware of this, it's then and only then that we can break the cycle and step out of it. And how do we break the cycle? We break the cycle by taking the greatest risk we can possibly take in life and just being ourselves.